The Giver by Lois Lowry. Chapter 1. It was almost December and Jonas was beginning to be frightened. No, wrong word, Jonas thought. Frightened meant a deep, sicking feeling of something terrible about to happen. Frightened was the way he had felt a year ago when an unidentified aircraft had flown into the community twice. He had seen it both times. Squinting towards the sky, he had seen the sleek jet almost a blur as its high speed go past, and a second later heard the blast of the sound that followed. Then, one more time a moment later, from the opposite direction, the same plane. At first, he had only been fascinated. He had never seen aircraft so close, for it was against the rules for pilots to fly over the community. Occasionally, when supplies were delivered by cargo planes to the landing field across the river, the children drove their bikes to the riverbank and watched, intrigued, the unloading and then takeoff directed to the west, always away from the community. But the aircraft a year ago had been different. It was not a squat, fat-bellied cargo plane, but a needle-nosed single-pilot jet. Jonas, looking around anxiously, had seen others, adults as well as children, stop what they'd been doing and wait, confused, for an explanation of the frightening event. Then all the citizens had been ordered to go into the nearest building and stay there, immediately, the rasping through the speakers had said. Leave your bicycles where they are. Instantly, obediently, Jonas had dropped his bike on its side in the path behind his family's dwelling. He had run indoors and stayed there, alone. His parents were both at work, and his little sister Lily was at the child care center where she spent her after-school hours. Looking through the front window, he had seen no people. None of the busy afternoon crew of street cleaners, landscape workers, and food delivery people who usually populated the community at this time of day. He saw only the abandoned bikes here and there on their sides. An upturned wheel on one was still revolving slowly. He had been frightened then. The sense of his own community silent, waiting, had made his stomach churn. He had trembled. But it had been nothing. Within minutes the speaker had cracked again, and the voice, resuming now, less urgent, had explained that a pilot in training has misread his navigational instructions and made a wrong turn. Apparently, the pilot had been trying to make his way back before his error was noticed. Needless to say, he will be released, the voice had said, followed by silence. There was an ironic tone to the final message, as if the speaker found it amusing, and Jonas had smiled a little, though he knew not what grim statement it had been. For a contributing citizen to be released from the community was a final decision, a terrible punishment, an overwhelming statement of failure. Even the children were scolded if they used the term lightly at play, jeering at a teammate who missed a catch or stumbled in a race. Jonas had done it once and had shouted at his best friend, "That's it, Asher, you're released!" In Asher's clumsy error, he had lost the match for his team. He had been taken aside for a brief and serious talk by the coach, and had hung his head with guilt and embarrassment, and apologized to Asher after the game. Now, thinking about the feeling of fear, he had pedaled home along the river path. He remembered that moment of palpable, stomach-sinking terror when the aircraft had streaked above. It was not that he was feeling now with December approaching. He searched for the right word to describe his own feeling. Jonas was careful about the language, not like his friend Asher, who talked too much and mixed things up, scrambling words and phrases until they were barely recognizable and often very funny. Jonas grinned and remembered the morning that Asher had dashed into the classroom late as usual, arriving breathless in the middle of the chanting of the morning anthem. When the class took their seats in the conclusion of the patriotic hymn, Asher remained standing to make a public apology as was required. I apologize for inconveniencing my learning community, Asher said, running through the standard apology phrase rapidly, still catching his breath. The instructor in class waited patiently for his explanation. The students all had been grinning because they had listened to Asher's explanation so many times before. I left home at the correct time, but when I was riding along the hatchery, the crew was separating some salmon. I guess I just got distraught watching them. I apologized to my classmates, Asher concluded. He smoothed his rumpled tunic and sat down. We accept your apology, Asher. The class recited the standard response in unison. Many of the students were biting their lips to keep from laughing. I accept your apology, Asher, the instructor said. He was smiling. And I thank you, because once again you have provided an opportunity for a lesson in language. Distraught is too strong an adjective to describe a salmon viewing. He turned and wrote distraught on the instructional board. Beside it, he wrote distracted. Jonas, nearing his home now, smiled at the recollection. Thinking still as he wheeled his bike into his narrowing port beside the door, he realized that frightened was the wrong word to describe his feelings. Now that December was here, it was too strong an adjective. He had waited a long time for his special December. Now that it was almost upon him, he wasn't frightened, but he was eager, he decided. He was eager for it to come, and he was excited, certainly. All of the 11s were excited about the event that would be coming so soon. But there was a little shudder of nervousness when he thought about it, about what might happen. Apprehensive, Jonas decided. That's what I am. Who wants to be first tonight for feelings? Jonas's father asked at the conclusion of their evening meal. It was one of the rituals, the evening telling of feelings. Sometimes Jonas and his sister Lily argued over turns, over who would get to go first. The parents, of course, were part of the ritual. They too told their feelings each evening. But like all parents, all adults, they didn't fight and wheedle for their turn. Nor did Jonas tonight. His feelings were too complicated this evening. He wanted to share them, but he wasn't eager to begin the process of sifting through his own complicated emotions, even with the help that he knew his parents would give. You go to Lily, he said, seeing his sister, who was much younger, only a 7, wiggling with impatience in her chair. I felt very angry this afternoon, Lily announced. The child care group was at the play area, and we had a visiting groups of 7, and we wouldn't obey the rules at all. One of them, a male, I don't know his name, kept going right to the front of the line of the slide, even though the rest of us were all waiting. I felt so angry at him. I made my hand into a fist, like this. She held up a clenched fist, and the rest of the family smiled at her, small defiant gesture. Why do you think the visitors didn't obey the rules? Mother asked. Lily considered and shook her head. I don't know. They acted like animals? Jonas suggested and laughed. That's right, Lily said, laughing too. Like animals. Neither child knew what the word meant exactly, but it was often used to describe someone uneducated or clumsy, someone who didn't fit in. Where were the visitors from? Father asked. Lily frowned, trying to remember. Our leader told us when he was making the welcoming speech, but I can't remember. I guess I wasn't paying attention. It was from another community. They had to leave very early. They had their midday meal on the bus. Mother nodded. Do you think it's possible that their rules may be different? And so, they simply didn't know that your play area rules were? Lily shrugged and nodded. I suppose. You've visited other communities, haven't you? Jonas asked. My group has, often. Lily nodded again. When we were 6s, we went and shared a whole school day with a group of 6s in their community. How did you feel when you were there? Lily frowned. I felt strange, because their methods were different. They were learning usage in my group that we hadn't learned yet, so we felt stupid. Father was listening with interest. I'm thinking, Lily said, about the boy who didn't obey the rules today. Do you think it's possible that he felt strange and stupid, being in a new place with rules that he didn't know about? Lily pondered. Yes, she said finally. I feel a little sorry for him, Jonas said, even though I don't even know him. I feel sorry for anyone who is in a place where you feel strange and stupid. How do you feel now, Lily? Father asked. Still angry? I guess not, Lily decided. I guess I feel a little sorry for him. And sorry I made a fist. She grinned. Jonas smiled back at his sister. Lily's feelings were always straightforward, fairly simple, usually easy to resolve. He guessed that his own had been too when he was so 7. He listened politely, though not very attentively, while his father took his turn, describing a feeling of worry that he'd had the day at work. A concern about one of the new children who wasn't doing well. Jonas's father's title was nurturer. He and the other nurturers were responsible for all the physical and emotional needs of every new child during its earliest life. It was a very important job, Jonas knew, but it wasn't one that interested him much. What gender is it? Lily asked. Male, Father said. He's a sweet little male with a lovely disposition, but he isn't growing as fast as he should, and he doesn't sleep soundly. We have him in extra care section for supplementary nurturing, but the committee's beginning to talk about releasing him. Oh no, Mother muttered sympathetically. I don't know how sad that would make me feel. Jonas and Lily both nodded sympathetically as well. Release of new children was always sad, because he hadn't had a chance to enjoy life within the community yet, and he hadn't done anything wrong. There was only 2 occasions of release which were not punished. Release of the elderly, which was the time of celebration of a life that was well and fully lived. And release of a new child, which always brought a sense of what could we have done. This was especially troubling for the nurturers like Father who felt that they had failed somehow. But it happened very rarely. Well, Father said, I'm going to keep trying. I may ask the committee for permission to bring him here at night if you don't mind. You know what the night crew nurturers are like. I think this little guy needs some extra. Of course, Mother said, and Jonas and Lily nodded. They had heard Father complain about the night crew before. It was a lesser job. Night crew nurturers assigned to those who lacked the interest or skill or insight for the more vital jobs at the daytime hours. Most of the people on the night crew had not been given spouses because they lacked, somehow, the essential capacity to connect with others, which was required for the creation of a family unit. Maybe we could even keep him, Lily suggested sweetly, trying to look innocent. The look was fake, Jonas knew. They all knew. Lily, Mother reminded her, smiling, you know the rules. 2 children, 1 male, 1 female to each family unit. It was written very clearly in the rules. Lily giggled. Well, she said, I thought maybe, just this once. Next, Mother, who held a prominent position in the Department of Justice, talked about her feelings. Today, a repeat offender had been brought before her, someone who had broken the rules before. Someone who she hoped had been adequately and fairly punished, and who had been restored to his place, to his job, his home, his family unit. To see him brought before her a second time caused her overwhelming feelings of frustration and anger, and even guilt, that she hadn't made a difference in his life. I feel frightened too for him, she confessed. You know there's no 3rd chance. The rules say that if there's a 3rd transgression, he simply has to be released. Jonas shivered. He knew it happened. There was even a boy in its group of 11s whose father had been released the year before. No one mentioned it. It was a disgrace. It was unspeakable. It was hard to imagine. Lily stood up and went to her mother. She stroked her mother's arm. From his place at the table, Father reached over and took her hand. Jonas reached for the other. One by one, they comforted her. Soon she smiled, thanked them, and murmured that she felt soothed. The ritual continued. Jonas, Father asked, your last tonight. Jonas sighed. This evening he had almost preferred to keep his feelings hidden, but it was, of course, against the rules. I'm feeling apprehensive, he confessed, glad that he had found the appropriate descriptive word that finally came to him. Why is that, son? His father looked concerned. I know there's really nothing to worry about, Jonas explained, and that every adult has been through it. I know you have, Father, and you too, Mother, but it's ceremony that I'm apprehensive about. It's almost December. Lily looked up, her eyes wide. The ceremony of 12, she whispered in an odd voice. Even the smallest children, Lily's age and younger, knew that it lay in the future for each one of them. I'm glad you told us of your feelings, Father said. Lily, Mother said, beckoning to the little girl. Go on now and get into your night clothes. Father and I are going to stay here and talk to Jonas for a while. Lily sighed, but obediently got down from her chair. Privately, she asked. Mother nodded. Yes, she said. This talk will be a private one with Jonas. Jonas watched as his father poured a fresh cup of coffee. He waited. You know, his father finally said, every December was exciting to me when I was young. It has been for you and Lily as well, I'm sure. Each December brings such changes. Jonas nodded. He could remember the Decembers back to when he'd become, well, probably a 4. The earlier ones had lost on him. But he observed them that each year, and he remembered Lily's earliest Decembers. He remembered when his family received Lily, the day she was named, and the day she had become a 1. The ceremony for the ones was always noisy and fun. Each December all the new children born in the previous year turned 1. 1 at a time. There was always 15 each year's group, if none had been released. They had been brought to the stage by the nurturers who had cared for them since birth. Some were always walking, wobbling on their unsteady legs. Others were no more than a few days old, wrapped in blankets, held by nurturers. I enjoyed the naming, Jonas said. His mother agreed, smiling. The year we got Lily, we knew, of course, that we'd received our female because we'd made our applications and had been approved. But I'd been wondering and wondering what her name would be. I could have sneaked a look at the list prior to the ceremony, Father confided. The committee always makes the list in advance, and it's right there in the office of the Nurture Center. As a matter of fact, he went on, I felt a little guilty about this, but I did go in this afternoon and look to see if this year's naming list had been made yet. It was right there in the office, and I looked up number 36. That's the little guy I've been concerned about, because it occurred to me that it might enchant his nurturing if I could call him by his name. Just privately, of course, when no one else is around. Did you find it? Jonas asked. He was fascinated. It didn't seem a terribly important rule, but the fact that his father had broken a rule at all awed him. He glanced at his mother, the one responsible for adherence to the rules, and was relieved that she was smiling. His father nodded. His name, if he makes it to the naming without being released, of course, is to be Gabriel. So I whispered that to him when I feed him every 4 hours and during exercise and playtime, if no one can hear me. I call him Gabe, actually, he said, grinning. Gabe, Jonas tried it out. A good name, he decided. Though Jonas had only become a 5 the year that they had required Lily and learned her name, he remembered the excitement, the conversations at home, wondering about her, how she would look, how she would be, how she would fit into the established family unit. He remembered climbing the steps to the stage with his parents, his father by his side that year instead of with the nurturers, since it was the year that he would be given a new child of his own. He remembered his mother taking the new child, his sister, into her arms, while the documents were read to the assembled family units. New child 23, the name had read. Lily. He remembered his father's look of delight, and that his father had whispered, "She's one of my favorites. I was hoping for her to be the one." The crowd had clapped and Jonas had grinned. He liked his sister's name. Lily, barely awake, had waved her small fist, and then they had stepped down to make room for the next family unit. "When I was in 11," his father said now, "as you are, Jonas, I was very impatient waiting for the ceremony of 12. It's a long 2 days. I remember that I enjoyed the ones as I always do, but that I didn't pay much attention to the other ceremonies except for my sister's. She became a 9 that year and got her bicycle. I've been teaching her to ride mine even though technically I wasn't supposed to." Jonas laughed. It was one of the few rules that was not taken very seriously and was almost always broken. The children all received their bikes at 9. They were not allowed to ride bikes before then, but almost always the older brothers and sisters had secretly taught their younger ones, and Jonas had been thinking already about teaching Lily. There was talk about changing the rule and giving the bicycles at an earlier age. The committee was studying the idea. When something went into a committee for study, the people always joked about it. They said that the committee members would become elders by the time the rule had made changes. Rules were very hard to change. Sometimes, if there was a very important rule, unlike the ones governing the age of bicycles, it would have to go eventually to the receiver for a decision. The receiver was the most important elder. Jonas had never seen him, that he knew of. Somebody in a position of such importance lived and worked alone. But the committee would never bother the receiver with a question about bicycles. They would simply fret and argue about it themselves for years until the citizens had forgotten that it had ever gone into them to study. His father continued, "So I watched and cheered when my sister Katia became a 9 and removed her hair ribbons and got her bicycle." Father went on, "Then I didn't pay much attention to the 10s and 11s, and finally at the end of the second day, which seemed to go on forever, it was my turn. It was the ceremony of 12. Jonas shivered. He pictured his father, who must have been a shy and quiet boy, for he was a shy and quiet man, seated with his group, waiting to be called to the stage. The ceremony of 12 was the last of the ceremonies, the most important. I remember how proud my parents looked, and my little sister too, even though she wanted to be out riding her bicycle publicly. She stopped fidgeting and was very still and attentive when my turn came. To be honest, Jonas, his father said, for me there was not the element of suspense as there is in your ceremony, because I was already fairly certain that my assignment was to be. Jonas was surprised. There was no way really to know in advance. It was a secret selection made by the leaders of the community of elders who took responsibility so seriously there were never even any jokes about the assignments. His mother seemed surprised too. "How could you have known?" she asked. His father smiled his gentle smile. "Well, it was clear to me, and to my parents later confessed that it had been obvious to them too, that my aptitude was. I had always loved new children more than anything. When my friends in my age group were holding bicycle races or building toy vehicles or bridges with their construction sets, or all the things I could do with my friends, Jonas pointed out, and his mother nodded in agreement. I always participated, of course, because as children we must experience all of those things, and I studied hard in school as you do, Jonas. But again and again, during free time, I found myself drawn to the new children. I spent almost all my volunteer hours helping the nursing center. Of course, the elders knew that from their observation. Jonas nodded. During the last year, he had been aware of the increasing level of observation. In school, at the recreational time, during volunteer hours, he had noticed that elders watched him and the other 11s. He had seen them taking notes. He knew too that elders were meeting for long hours with all the instructors that he and the other 11s had had during the years of school. So I expected it, and I was pleased, but not at all surprised, when my assignment was announced as nurturer, Father explained. Did everyone applaud, even though they weren't surprised? Jonas asked. Oh, of course. They were happy for me, as my assignment was what I wanted the most. I felt very fortunate. His father smiled. Were any of the 11s disappointed your year? Jonas asked. Unlike his father, he had no idea what his assignment would be, but he knew that some would disappoint him. Though he respected his father's work, nurture would not be his wish, and he didn't envy laborers at all. His father thought, No, I don't think so. Of course, the elders are so careful in their observations and selections. I think it's probably the most important job in our community, his mother commented. My friend Yokisho was surprised by her selection as doctor, Father said, but she was thrilled. And let's see, there was Andre. I remember that when we were boys, he never wanted to do physical things. He spent all recreational time he could with his construction set, and his volunteer hours were always on building sites. The elders knew that, of course. Andre was given the assignment of engineer, and he was delighted. Andre later designed the bridge that crosses the river to the west of town, Jonas's mother said. It wasn't there when we were children. There are very rarely disappointments, Jonas. I don't think you need to worry about that, his father reassured him. And if there are, you know there's an appeal process. But they all laughed at that. An appeal went to committee for study. I worry a little about Asher's assignment, Jonas confessed. Asher's such fun, but he doesn't really have any serious interests, and he makes a game out of everything. His father chuckled. You know, he said, I remember when Asher was a new child in the nursing center, before he was named. He never cried. He giggled and laughed at almost everything. All of us and the staff enjoyed nursing Asher. The elders know Asher, his mother said. They'll find exactly the right assignment for him. I don't think you need to worry about him. But Jonas, let me warn you about something that you may not have occurred to you. I know I don't think about it until after my ceremony of 12. What's that? Well, it's the last of the ceremonies, as you know. After 12, age isn't important. Most of us even lose track of how old we are as time passes. Through the information is in the Hall of Open Records, and we could go and look it up if we wanted to. What's important is the preparation for adult life and the training you'll receive in your assignment. I know that, Jonas said. Everybody knows that. But it means, his mother went on, that you'll move into a new group, and each of your friends will. You'll no longer be spending your time with your group of 11s. After the ceremony of 12, you'll be with your assignment group, with those in training. No more volunteer hours, no more recreational hours. So your friends will no longer be as close. Jonas shook his head. Asher and I will always be friends, he said firmly. And there will still be school. That's true, his father agreed. But what your mother is saying is true. There will be changes. Good changes, though, his mother pointed out. After my ceremony of 12, I missed my childhood recreation. But when I entered my training for law and justice, I found myself with people who shared my interests. I made friends on a new level, friends of all ages. Did you still play at all after 12? Jonas asked. Occasionally, his mother replied. But it didn't seem as important to me. I did, his father said, laughing. I still do, Every day at the nurturing center, I play bounce on the knee and peekaboo and hide the teddy. He reached over and stroked Jonas's neatly trimmed hair. Fun doesn't have to end because he become a 12. Lily appeared, wearing her night clothes, in the doorway. She gave an impatient sigh. This is certainly a very long private conversation, she said, and there are certain people waiting for their comfort objects. Lily, her mother said fondly, you're very close to being an 8, and when you're an 8, your comfort object will be taken away. It will be recycled to the younger children. You should be starting to go off to sleep without it. But her father had already gone to the shelf and taken down the stuffed elephant which was kept there. Many of the comfort objects, like Lily's, were soft, stuffed imaginary creatures. Jonas's had been called a bear. Here you go, Lily Billy, she said. I'll come help you remove your hair ribbons. Jonas and his mother rolled their eyes. Yet they watched affectionately as Lily and her father headed to her sleeping room with the stuffed elephant that had been given to her as her comfort object when she was born. His mother moved to her big desk and opened her briefcase. Her work never seemed to end, even when she was home in the evening. Jonas went to his own desk and began to sort through his school papers for the evening's assignment, but his mind was still on December and the coming ceremony. Though he had been reassured by the talk with his parents, he hadn't the slightest idea what assignment the elders would be selecting for his future or how he might feel about it when the day came.